started. Thank you so much for being here. If you could get some coffee, grab a donut, take a seat. We're going to go ahead and get started here. So my name is State Senator Ethan Corson. Really privileged to represent Senate District 7 here in Northeast Johnson County. Is this their first meeting for anybody? Oh, you raise your hand a little higher. We're going to clap for you, so, you know. Is he here? So, well, thank you so much for being here. This is our 58th consecutive monthly town hall. So, while I'm on that topic, I want to remind everybody that for November and December, we move our town halls up and we're doing the third Saturday instead of the fourth Saturday because of the holidays. So if you haven't signed in, please do that so we can send you those reminders. But in November and December, we'll be meeting at 9 a.m. on the third Saturday instead of the fourth Saturday. So let me just I'm going to kind of share with you a little bit about, what I've been up to since we last met. And some of the issues that I've really been thinking about. But before I do that, I want to remind everybody, this is going to be our last town hall before we have our municipal elections coming up. I want to remind everybody to try to get out and vote in those elections. If you have any races on your ballot, I think it's really important that we show up and vote in those races. Those are some of the most important races in the sense of these are a lot of the folks who are most directly tied to our communities. And so it's really important that you make your voice heard. Mayor Bob Pape from Merriam is going to be on the ballot running for re-election as mayor. Mayor Pape does an outstanding job and I think is really exactly what we want in a public servant. You know, every time I talk to Mayor Pape, it's really just focused on what is best for Merriam. You know, it's never about party. It's never about ideology. It's really about how do we move Merriam forward. And so I would look for people like Mayor Pape and others on your ballot when you go in to vote. So please vote in your municipal elections. Probably the thing that has taken up the most oxygen this past month has been the thought about redistricting and the idea that whether we should go back for a special session. So sort of the lay of the land, to the extent I understand it, is that there was approved a 4-day special session. The funding for that special session was approved. And so I think this is one of the many reasons that I've been opposing this redistricting. A 4-day session would cost Kansas taxpayers $460,000. And so that has been approved. To call in a special session, to have the legislature call itself into special session, which has only been done once before in Kansas history, you would need 2/3 of all the senators and 2/3 of all the House members to sign a petition to call that special session. I'm really interested in what my House colleagues are hearing on in that chamber. In the Senate, they do have the 2/3, so the Senate has met that requirement. And I'll let my House colleagues provide an update on kind of what they're hearing from their colleagues. So kind of TBD, the tentative date that has been floated for that special session has been November 7th. Don't know if that'll still hold, but that is sort of what has been floated. I'll share with you that one of the things that I've really been focused on this past month is rural healthcare in Kansas. So if you follow us on social media, you'll see that we've been traveling the state really, really extensively. For the other thing that I'm working on that I'm not going to talk about. But we've been really traveling the state really, really extensively. And one of the things that we've been doing as we've been traveling is really trying to sit down with folks in these rural communities to get a real on-the-ground understanding of what's going on with the healthcare delivery system there. And so it's something that I'd read a lot about and studied, but it's really much more impactful when you're really on the ground in communities talking to folks who are dealing with it every day. And so, it really impressed upon me that we do have a real crisis in rural Kansas in terms of access to healthcare. So we sat down with the leadership of Pratt Regional Medical Center when we were in Pratt, and right now there are no OB doctors between Pratt and Denver. There are family practice doctors who deliver babies, but they're not OBs in places like Garden and Dodge and other places like that. There are also no GI doctors between Pratt and Denver. So, just in many of these instances, a real lack of care, especially kind of specialized care. So, I'll just give you kind of two takeaways that I had. One of them is they described what the failure to enact Medicaid expansion has meant for them in a different way than I had always thought about it. And so I'll kind of share with you how they said that it really affects them on the ground, which is that there is this pool of folks in Pratt, for example, or in the surrounding counties, and they're really, by any stretch of the imagination, really the working poor. I mean, they are working, but they're very low income folks. And so these are the folks who would be covered under expansion had we done that. So then had we done that and they would have come into Pratt Regional, their care would have been covered by Medicare and Medicaid. So because we haven't expanded Medicaid, those folks are now having to buy plans on the exchange. And the only plans that they can really afford are these very low premium, high deductible plans. And so that's the kind of coverage, because they want to get some coverage, don't qualify for Medicaid because we haven't expanded Medicaid. So when they go out on the exchange, the only plan they can afford is a low premium, high deductible plan. But if they have a healthcare crisis, if they have a heart attack, if they have something else severe, they're obviously not able to cover a $5,000 deductible, right? And so what a hospital like Pratt does is they try to set up a payment plan for these folks where, they may pay $100 a month for some period, but the person in most instances can't really even pay that. So it ends up being a huge burden on the patient to try to make these payments every month. And then in most instances, Pratt said on a $5,000 or $10,000 deductible plan, we'd probably recover $1,000 of that in most instances. And then the rest of it, they have to write off. And so it just makes the financial realities of their operations really difficult when you have this pool of people and you're routinely writing off, 90% or 80% of the care that you provide. And so that was a real challenge. The other challenge is just a lot of these communities are struggling to attract and retain doctors, to attract and retain docs. And so it really sort of highlighted for me that when we talk about economic development in a lot of these places, it's not just about attracting businesses or jobs specific, to those communities, but it's also about making sure that we're also doing community development to make those places where it's easier to recruit and retain doctors. So, things like, parks for their families, just the sort of amenities that are going to make staying there more attractive. Because I was shocked to hear this, but a doctor in Pratt actually makes more money than a doctor in Johnson County in most instances, because they have to pay such a premium to get the person to go there and to stay there. So that was a really interesting thing that I learned. And they said even with that, it's just a real struggle for us to keep those docs in our communities. And so I'm worried because I think that this crisis is really just going to be made worse by the federal legislation that was recently passed. Kansas has 100 rural hospitals. And it's always surprising, it's such a round number, but that is our current number that we have. And 67 of them are at a high risk of closure. And so what I would say is if even a third or a quarter of those 67 do end up closing in the next several years, that's going to really further exacerbate an already a really difficult situation in terms of rural healthcare access. So we were spent a lot of time in Western Kansas. I mentioned the visits to Pratt and Garden City. In Garden City, we talked to the CEO of a community health organization there to get his perspective on what he's seeing in his community. But in Southeast Kansas, there's also real challenges as well. And one of the things that has happened since we last met, in 2018, Fort Scott lost their hospital. Mercy Hospital in Fort Scott closed. So many of the residents there have been driving to Joplin to get care from Freeman Medical Center in Joplin. So Freeman had announced an expansion into Frontenac. They had planned to open a hospital in Frontenac. When we were in Southeast, folks were really excited about this, that there was finally going to be a hospital in Southeast Kansas that could service that community. They wouldn't have to continue to drive to Joplin. They could be in Frontenac, which is in Crawford County. And then just about 10 days ago, the hospital system said that because of, among other things, because of the federal legislation that was passed, they are no longer going to open that hospital. They said it's no longer feasible for them to open up the hospital with the contemplated cuts that federal bill would enact. So really devastating for that community to kind of feel like they just got the rug pulled out from under them when they had expected that this hospital was going to be coming, and then to get the news that it's not. So just wanted to share with you that for me, that's how I've spent a lot of the past month, is really diving into our rural healthcare system and trying to just learn more about what the state can do to try to improve access to care, because I do think it's going to be a continuing, ongoing issue. So let me stop there and turn it over to one of my next colleagues, Representative Rui Xu.
Thank you all. And I'll have to apologize. I have to leave right after this. My daughter Astra's in a piano concert at 10 a.m., so I got to duck out for that. So a couple of things for me, kind of two high-level things and then two more kind of legislative things. The first one is that on the redistricting front, we're hearing that the House is still a couple votes short, maybe the number between 4 to 6 to 8 votes short in terms of signing on for redistricting. But that's kind of eroding over time. The number was bigger, and then Chris Kobach says, we need a special session to address transgender driver's licenses. And so then some of the social conservatives signed on. And then all of a sudden, the Senate president said, actually, we need to address property taxes too. And so that got another couple of people who were worried about property taxes to sign on. So it's kind of eroding over time. I'm operating under the assumption that I will be in Topeka on November 7th for this. But even if we do that, there is still some optimism, I think, not a ton, but some optimism that the votes won't be there to get to override the governor's veto. So the maps will almost certainly pass kind of the first time around. The governor will almost certainly veto, not to speak for the governor, and then they'll need 2/3 votes to override the governor on the maps as well. And then after that, the Supreme Court also gets to review it. So, we're hearing a lot of rumors that a lot of surprising names that are kind of staunchly opposed to redistricting. Usually you have kind of your moderates and then your conservatives kind of fighting out kind of in their tranches. This one's a really weird mix of names. I don't think this particular mix of names I've ever seen on the same side of an issue. So we're hearing that some people are willing to lose their seats over this particular issue. So I don't know. We'll see, but I'm operating under the assumption that we'll be there. The second issue is something that we just heard for sure yesterday, and that's the federal government has given guidance that states shall suspend SNAP benefits until the government shutdown ends. And this is just going to be hugely, hugely damaging for a lot of people all around the state, urban, rural, anybody who relies on these benefits. The ironic thing is that this particular letter was signed by a former colleague of the House members who quite literally said, as he got hired by the Trump administration, we're going to make some people cry. And I think that is certainly going to be the case once these benefits are suspended. I think you guys know me. I try to remain, for the most part, pretty nonpartisan when I'm up here, but I think it's just a really terrible look to be suspending SNAP benefits while tearing down part of the White House to build a ballroom. That is just a tremendous kind of, for me, kind of a let them eat cake moment of just kind of not realizing what people on the ground are feeling and what they're going to be feeling while we're building this huge, elaborate new ballroom. So, yeah. What? Yeah, sure. I agreed, but I just kind of it's a bad look though, right? While poor people are not being able to eat, to be building a new ballroom. So, we'll just kind of see how this goes. I'm not on the federal level. I don't know how this is all going to play out, but it seems like it's going to be a pretty long and protracted shutdown. Kind of on the state legislative level, I've had a couple of interim meetings over the last month or so. The first one is on pensions. This is pretty good news for Kansas as a whole. Our Capers Trust Fund for the first time has hit $30 billion, which is a tremendous amount. I think earlier this year, just within 1 year, it went from $29 billion to $30 billion in the Capers Trust Fund. So it's growing, it's healthy, and we're going to keep looking at enhancements for those of you that are on Capers 3. We're going to keep trying for a cost of living adjustment for those of you on Capers 2 or 1. And then just this past week, Representative Clayton and I were on the Commerce Interim, and we had a really interesting and exciting discussion about housing. And then this is something that I've talked about in this room for quite some time. We discussed things like accessory dwelling units. A lot of states have started allowing accessory dwelling units statewide. We had a really, really interesting discussion on single stairwell requirements. Raise your hand if you guys know what that is. Okay, quite a few. I've talked about it before, I think. But yeah, many current modern code requires apartments, if there's more than 3 units per floor, I believe, to make sure that they have access to 2 stairwells. But that has not always been the case, and that is not the case in much of the rest of the world. There are certain scenarios where they allow access to 1 single stairwell. And so this is the reason that all modern apartments kind of look like a hotel nowadays, like these long, big hallways with stairwells on both sides. And so a lot of states have started kind of rolling back that requirement if a apartment building is below 6 feet and there are certain requirements. So this just gives more choice to developers, especially in rural areas with like kind of small downtowns and narrow lots. It'll just kind of create more options for apartments there. We had discussions on things like minimum lot sizes. A lot of places, such as like Emporia, has like a 7,500 minimum lot size for new developments, which like in the big scheme of things is not big, right? Like I live in a pretty small house, pretty small lot, and it's 8,800 or something like that. But for a city to require a minimum lot size, it can be pretty onerous. Maybe we would like that smaller home, maybe that 3-bed, 1-bath on kind of a 5,000 square lot. Right now, developers literally can't build that in a lot of Kansas, even if they wanted to, even if they had the space to do that, they would have to have it on 7,500. So we're looking at stuff like that, just kind of tweaking it, and then seeing what we can do to kind of expand housing both in rural and urban and suburban Kansas, with the goal of just really increasing supply, which will really help with your property tax appraisals, right? If you get compared to comparable sales, the demand is that high because there's not enough housing, then your appraisals keep going up and up and up, right? But if there's enough housing supply, that'll really slow down the market and then hopefully help out with property taxes as well. So that's it for me. I'll pass it over to...
Question.
Sure,
What
yeah.
can we do about this new map deal? Who can we call? What's the state Democratic Party doing? That sort of thing.
I can't speak for the state Democratic Party. I know that for us as the House Democrats, we have been having phone banks.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can find a link or something for you to sign up to do that. But we've been phone banking kind of areas where, especially in Johnson County, Sharice Davids won, but is represented by a Republican. And for me, it's really bad politics, in my opinion, to be in one of those districts and to have signed on to this letter. But from what we're hearing, every single Johnson County Republican has signed on to the letter, even if they are in districts that Sharice has won. So I would suggest joining those phone banks and just calling people and talking to people in those districts and just be like, hey, people seem pretty happy with that.
Well,
But I think we're getting the message to save questions for later, which other people will be able to handle. So with that, I will hand it over to Commissioner Becky Fast. Thank you, guys.
And tell your daughter good luck in the piano recital. Becky Fast, I'm your county commissioner. I represent Northeast Johnson County on the county commission. I do want to highlight, I worked for former Congressman Dennis Moore for 12 years. He served the 3rd District from 1999 to 2010. When he was in Congress, our 3rd District was all Wyandotte County, all Johnson County, all Miami County, and all Douglas County. So he was the first Democrat that won the 3rd District in like over 50 years. So when redistricting came up, the goal was to make his district harder for him to win. And when he ran for re-election, it was against Phil Klein, Chris Kobach. So even back then, there was kind of a shift in the Republican Party. So what they did is they divided Lawrence down Mass. East side would be if Dennis Moore, west side of Mass would be with the 2nd Congressional District representative. In Massachusetts is, everybody knows, it's the downtown Lawrence. So is there anything crazier than that? But at that point, then, it went to federal district court, and because that was pre all these Supreme Court rulings, they were able to say that that was political gerrymandering, and that map didn't map didn't continue. But that was pre all these Supreme Court cases that now say it's fine to do political gerrymandering. So then his district, it was like at Iowa, he had east of Iowa. So it was still divided. And I worked in Douglas County. I was the head of constituent services for his whole district. And what I saw is that the congressional rep, because half of Douglas was a part of 15 other counties, that rep rarely came to Douglas County. And the people of Douglas County, Lawrence, they basically went to Dennis Moore for all his concerns, and the western part of Douglas County did not feel like they had representation. And there wasn't cohesive representation when you divide up a county. And that's a real issue. When you do this gerrymandering, you dilute, the consensus representation for a county. So what concerns me about if Johnson County gets divided, like let's say they, put Southern Johnson County with the 2nd District. Well, we have 2 of the busiest airports in Kansas. I mean, our executive airport in Southern Johnson County is the 3rd most busiest airport for commercial. Paula Schwach, who's here, serves on the airport commission for me. It is 2nd to KCI. And so Sharice Davids brought in, working with Senator Moran, $10 million that air traffic control didn't have technology. They were basically looking in the sky, to route people. That's how out of date it is. But if you divide that Southern Johnson County, that area will be then with 20 other counties. That earmark or federal investment wouldn't have happened. The same with Turkey Creek. Rep. David's got Turkey Creek. Turkey Creek, we have the Mayor Pape there. It's Merriam, Overland Park, Wyandotte County. Water runs through multiple areas. If you divide up Northern Johnson County, it is difficult for that rep to go to Congress to their colleagues because they're only serving a small part to bring in that federal investment. So we lose as a county because the airport serves the whole county. It serves the whole region. Merriam not getting flooded helps all of us. It helps Overland Park. So that's my concern. And when you talk to your legislators to talk about how, we are a community of interest and having cohesive representation. So the county commission, we were notified that we would not, our public health department serves women, infant, and children benefits, WIC, the, program have been around for decades. It helps breastfeeding women. It provides infant formula, really nutrition for babies and pregnant women who've just given birth. and that money was ending. So the commission allocated out of reserves $121,000 to keep the program going. We just heard that the U.S. Department of Agriculture allocated contingency funding. It goes to the state, and then the state provides us. So we now don't have to use those reserves, but we're in the 4th week of shutdown. We might still have to if this continues to the end of November. So these are 4,500 women and children. Well, there's 4,500 participants in our county go to WIC benefits. And in the summer, we have this incredible WIC community garden that Johnson County residents volunteer at. They get incredible vegetables. It's really amazing community partnership. So the other program, being a social worker, and thank you to our illustrious representative who just spoke about SNAP benefits. I appreciate that. There's 118,000 Kansans that rely on SNAP food assistance. Johnson County has 12,000. And what people don't realize is these are mainly, again, women and children. If you're an able-bodied person, you receive maybe 3 months of benefits. You're very low income. One person, you can't make more than $1,600 a month. I mean, that is very low income. And so I am very worried about these families. So Johnson County Human Services has a food bank, and they have human services that support people with rental assistance, but their food bank already is getting used. This summer in budget, we allocated them some additional funding to help them, because even last year they had so many people coming to their food bank. My church, Asbury, has a food bank. Village does. Trinity Lutheran. Antioch Church on 75th has a tiny pantry. So I just encourage everyone, bring some donations to these churches. They are seeing an increased number of people needing their help, and you don't have to bring food. You can just bring a $10 bill or a $20 bill or a gift certificate to Hy-Vee, and they will go get the items they need.
Diapers are needed.
What? And diapers, right? Yeah, any of those. Toothpaste, those are things they don't often get, diapers, toothpaste. So just making a call out for all of us this week to, bring a donation to our local food bank to support them during this time. So that is where I'm at on what's happening at the county. I'm worried about that we're going to be hearing additional federal cuts. And then, what is our response as a county? How do we make up these, needs? And that might mean a cut in another program. So these are really, we provide services to real people, real lives who count on these benefits and these services. So the next person, Rep. Clayton or Rep. Stogsdill. Woo! Slow-mo.
Thank you. Well, it's good to see you all here this morning. So I had to get up early at 5 o'clock because I heard that there was a cheap off-the-strip downtown casino that was had gone bankrupt and was selling all of its gold medallions. I wanted to be sure and get a few before it closed out for my office in Topeka, but some guy in Washington was bidding on them, and I didn't have a chance. So anyway, interesting morning. Had several things over the last 10 days or so that I think are real relevant for what's going on right now. I attended the Kansas Water Conference. I serve on the Water Committee in Topeka, and I attended the Kansas Water Conference over at the Arts and Heritage Center a week or so ago, and it was very well attended. I had people there from the Kansas Water Office, from Water One, from Kansas wastewater districts, all that. You can't believe how lucky we are here in Johnson County to have Water One and the wastewater district here. It's one of the best, not only in Kansas, but in the country. And they were, I talked to the Connie Owens, who's the head of the Kansas Water Department, and Connie's in our water committee all the time. And she was saying that they are very concerned, one, about grants and so on being held up for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. and which is does a lot of obviously our health programs and so on in Kansas, but they don't know whether they're going to lose funding or what they're going to do. It's hard to plan for anything if you don't know what the heck's going to go on. When we come back in January to the legislature in Topeka, and then she said the decline in these EPA regulations could be devastating to water, because I mean they're allowing polluters now, or under these new rules, the polluters will be much more able to do their polluting thing. And where does a lot of that end up? In our water supply. So it would allow more toxins in our air, our land, and our water. That's very concerning. The other thing, I took the Shawnee Mission superintendent took me for a tour of the new Tomahawk Elementary School in Prairie Village. It's in my district a couple days ago, and incredible building. What a great investment. I mean, this is not a school building. This is a learning center, a true learning center. And it's too bad that the federal government and our friends across the aisle in Topeka don't seem to be nearly as excited about public education as they should be. And the superintendent was worried about whether or not federal grants would be coming in, or any kind of federal assistance that they've counted on in the past could be counted on in the future. And of course, we don't expect any upgrade in support for special education this coming year. And that was, I'll tell you, it just kind of a side that irks my soul that as a former naval officer, we don't have money for pediatric cancer research, but we have enough money to send a carrier task force to the Caribbean. That's just outrageous. So anyway, and I had a long discussion with the nurse at Tomahawk, and I asked her, I said, what are you expecting with these new vaccine rules and stuff? And she said, measles is coming back. And she said, and probably whooping cough and God knows what. And the problem is that you dip down to a certain level of kids not getting vaccinated in the kindergarten and so on. She said, your herd immunity is gone. And she has a PhD in that particular subject area. So I think she knows what she's talking about. She's been a nurse in Shawnee Mission for 14 years, and she said, that scares me to death. So we're going to have to watch that very carefully, because it does seem to be a trend across the country that more parents are questioning as to whether or not they ought to have their kids vaccinated before they come back to school. And we actually had a pediatrician just shortly after COVID came into my office that I share with Pam Curtis from KCK, and she was a pediatrician from Western Kansas, brought along 4 nurses, and didn't bother to talk to me. She knew I would not be a friendly face on this, but she talked to Pam, and she should have known that Pam would not be a friendly face on this either. But she was telling us how bad vaccines were. A pediatrician and 4 nurses. And anyway, she did that, and finally she asked Pam if she had any questions. I couldn't stand it. I said, I do. And they went, oh, God. And I said, it's not really so much a question as it is as an opinion. And I said, I'm very glad that my parents refused to give me polio. Yes. And she said, oh, polio was just on its way out. It was just naturally going to go away. So, yeah, and that's a pediatrician. So I think this is something that really doesn't get the attention that it should be. These are going to bring back diseases and so on that are basically were decimated with the vaccines that we've had. So we'll have to watch that very carefully. After the water conference, I stopped in and talked to the director of the arts department at the Johnson County Arts and Heritage Center. And we spend, the creative arts industry in Kansas is huge. And it is a very important industry. And we had to fight like crazy last year to keep it at the funding for that industry in Kansas at $1.5 million. I I mean, in a billions and billions of dollars in budget, $1.5 million for an industry that creates tens of thousands of jobs all across the country. And I'll tell you, when I was president of the Trade Association for all the high-tech industries in Kansas and Missouri, and we would survey people on the companies on the East and West Coast and say, what do you look for if you were going to build a company someplace new or develop or increase your standing in Kansas and so on? What are the things you look for? Number one was always great public schools. Absolutely number one. People are not going to bring there and develop a company in an area where the schools are lousy. Second was great colleges and universities. And that's where they get a lot of these new companies get their graduates, obviously. And we'd like to keep those kids in Kansas, by the way. But the third was always quality of life. They're not going to come to some wasteland for the arts and so on. They want museums, they want theaters, they want movies, they want art galleries, they want museums, all of that sort of thing. And here the state does not seem to appreciate that or understand the value of the creative arts industry. So we're going to continue to work on that next year and hopefully get the funding increase, but it probably ought to be funded. Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, and Oklahoma all have like 10 times as much money invested in creative arts as Kansas does. And I think a lot of people think that if it's not something that's painted on black velvet and includes Elvis, it's not really art. So anyway, the one really hopeful thing that I attended this week was the ACLU dinner a couple nights ago. And they had the head of the ACLU from Washington, D.C. come in and talk. And he has the reality that we're facing unprecedented times in this country and on people's rights and so on like that. But he's seeing pushback all over the country. And he said the ACLU will be leading that pushback. And I have every confidence they will. And I hope that we all will chip in some to the ACLU because they're the biggest hope we have for keeping our rights and so on here in the United States. So anyway, it was very interesting to hear him speak and very encouraging. So that was kind of a good way to end the week. But that's kind of what I've been doing over the last time since we met. And I'll be happy to answer questions when times come. Turn this over to Representative Clayton.
Thank you. You know, Stogsdill is someone who owns a Velvet Elvis, albeit an ironic one. I feel a little seen here. It was funny. I bought it at a garage sale with some good times. But in any case, good morning to all of you. I am Representative Stephanie Sawyer Clayton. I have been proudly representing the 19th district, which is the one in Chartreuse over there. That's Metcalfe, the state line, mostly 83rd to 103rd. But if you're east of Metcalfe, it's 95th north to Somerset. And so, like my colleagues, I have been serving on a number of study committees or interim committees. I'm the ranking minority member on the House Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee. And so we had 2 meetings this past week, and I've had the opportunity to serve on the Tax Interim Committee. So, you know, it's funny because obviously I like, you know, getting into some of the more controversial issues. You know, my other committee is Federal and State Affairs, which, you know, covers all of the liquor laws and the gambling laws and all of the really, you know, stuff that really wakes you up at 9 o'clock in the morning. But the thing that really keeps our government actually going and actually functioning has always been tax. And when I hang out with friends at cocktail parties and they ask me about my job and they ask me what is the most important to me and what I'm most passionate about, I say taxes, because it's everything. And then I just watch their eyes glaze over, which is fine. I mean, when I first got elected, this would have been right after the Brownback tax plan passed. And so when I came up and started learning as a legislator, I was used to dealing with a legislative budget that showed dramatic plummets into the red. And so I would have colleagues who were very passionate about education, and they would say, well, we need this policy and that policy and the other. And I thought, you know, this is akin to sitting at your kitchen table with a very minimum wage job saying, well, we need to send our kids to Harvard. Well, the way that we need to do that is to make sure that we are finding a reasonable and balanced tax plan that allows us for a functioning government that gives us the services we need and the quality that we demand based on the fact that we are basically unwillingly paying for this without hurting too many groups, right? And so as we're moving forward, we've Senator Corson has talked about property taxes, so I believe that Representative Xu has as well. This is still something that I hear about a great deal. And while in the tax committee, and Senator Corson is also on that interim with me, the way that these study committees work is that even though there are senators and House members on there, they alternate between who gets to be the chair, and whoever gets to be the chair sets the agenda. So this was the Senate tax chair, so it was her view of why a cap on valuations, not unlike California's policy, should be the best plan. So all of our conferees, all of the people who are providing testimony were sort of by design to steer us towards, see, this is why you should do this. It's kind of frustrating, but then again, my job is to look beyond the bias and to find the good policy. But what was fortunate, though, was some of the work that was really taking place behind the scenes when the tax committee broke for lunch. I went to a restaurant with my colleague who's the ranking on the tax committee from Wichita, and we saw a whole bunch of Johnson County people with the House tax chair having lunch. They are working on a compromise plan that will give us some property tax relief, in particular here, without overstepping on the purviews of duly elected local officials. This is, yes, I think it's wonderful. Now, is it annoying that a lot of this work is kind of taking place behind the scenes? Yeah, it is. I would prefer that it take place, under the light where we can all see it. But I'm telling you, it happened at least. So now the nice thing is that when we start seeing these things as moving forward, again, this has been the number one issue that I have been hearing all over the state. And when you see people starting to come together to solve that, that is a good sign. Because I think that the one thing that unites all of us is that we all have to eat and we all have to live somewhere. And so look for something positive to be happening in the tax realm as we go into the next legislative session. I think you will see reasonable relief that does not take away our nice quality of life that we pay good money to have up here in Johnson County. Now, let's see. As far as the Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee is concerned, we have had some meetings. We spent a lot of time discussing Bitcoin because one of the committee members has invested a lot in Bitcoin, and it's like, okay. Again, it still seems like a very volatile market. There's a lot of pushes to get, just basically some guardrails that were put in by the Fed loosened. And so again, that's thank goodness, more of a federal issue, but they are pushing for more right to mine as far as like mining Bitcoin is concerned to kind of take away some of those restrictions. Well, keep in mind, mining Bitcoin uses up a great deal of energy, and then whose electrical costs go up in your everyday budgets? You guys. And so again, since we're already dealing with inflation, we're already dealing with higher costs, that is something that I am not going to be inclined to support. Luckily, a lot of the older fellas that I was sitting next to in committee were like, wait a minute, what is this? And it's like, yes, this is great. I'm glad you hate the things that I hate, that we can get together and kind of make some good legislation, right? So, and we will continue to do some analysis on economic development incentives next week. So now I do support economic incentives as long as they have guardrails and clawbacks. So if we give these incentives and if they're not delivering on the jobs and the economic benefits, then yeah, we should be clawing that back. Because again, it is your money. It is the most sensible way to do things. So as long as you have those in place, then I do support them. There are some colleagues of mine that just say, let's just eliminate income tax entirely. And that does not, I do not believe that it does that. But then again, I'm not really a supply sider. I'm more of a Keynesian when it comes to economics. And so I tend to conduct myself that way when it comes to fiscal policy. I guess the last thing that I will say is about legislative redistricting. What is interesting is that this happens a lot. We get the push and pull of power between state and locally elected or federally elected and state. But what we need to keep in mind is that when our founding fathers set up this system and had the state legislatures control this redistricting, they did it. It is beautifully and complicated designed, right? Or it is a beautiful and complicated design, democracy is, and it is by design to make it very difficult to unravel. So now, why I have a lot of colleagues that say, okay, they'll probably end up getting the votes in the House. I've seen people fold, and I understand why, because we also have to keep in mind that the things that I am seeing in my algorithm are things that I naturally click on that make me feel good. It's confirmation bias. That is a bubble. That is not the way that everyone else thinks. It's very important to step outside of your bubble and understand that while a lot of us think redistricting is silly and it's wrong, of course we don't like it. We don't want the power of Johnson County, especially the economic power. We are the economic engine of the state. It makes no sense to put sugar in the gas tank of the economic engine of the state and dilute our power. That's the way that we feel, but there are people in other parts of the state that maybe think we're a little bit too powerful and they don't like us. They like our money, but they don't like us. But it is important to empathize and to understand where they're coming from, because if you don't know why someone is thinking the way that they're thinking, you just think they're wrong, I'm right, and you're not going to get any headway. There are also people that see Illinois and California, maybe not so much California because right now they have nonpartisan redistricting, but there's a push to change that. And so they see people and they're like, well, they gerrymander politically in Illinois and in New York. Why can't we fight fire with fire? Now, I don't like that because I think, okay, right is right, wrong is wrong. Redistricting is a very impartial and incredibly morally important committee to be on. And when I was on that committee with Senator Corson a couple of years ago, I took those duties very seriously to try and be as non-biased as possible. But there are a lot of people that say, hey, if they're doing it, we should do it back. And so while I don't necessarily agree with those takes, it is important to know, because sometimes you look and just think, why on earth would they do this? Well, that's why. So coming from that point of understanding is important. And it's also important to know, too, that there are other states that are kind of standing up and saying no. Indiana does not have the votes to do this. And so if you are a Kansas legislator and you're looking and you're seeing, okay, well, Texas did it and Missouri right next door did it, but like we should never imitate Missouri ever. But in any case, now we're starting to see other states that are sort of similar to us ideologically. Indiana is, more of a Rust Belt state, but they're, not that different from Kansas, and they are saying no. So you might see a little bit of a tide turning there. Now, if it happens, it happens. We will deal with it as best we can. It's important to note that the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce has come out hard against this. And you know what? I care about you. I care about your money. And I'm going to listen to the business community on this. And so if we're starting to see the business community pushing back against this, that is incredibly important, because you need business interests that are represented by someone in the DC swamp that understands the way that things are here and that can push and make sure that we don't have our vibrant economy decimated. Because when that happens, we're all in big trouble. So again, stay tuned and it's not easy, but try to have an open mind. Try and understand why there are people that want things that you don't want, because then you're more able to have those conversations and change hearts and minds. That is how we create change. That's how we own our democracy. That's how we push the pendulum. I think it's time for questions, because I could talk forever. You guys don't want that.
All right, Maxwell, I think is going to come around with, Mia's going to come around with the mic. So let's wait till the mic gets to you to ask your question so everybody can hear. All right.
Good morning. Thank you. So so many comments I could make, but I wanted to point out a couple of things. And I think it's still closer for Pratt to come to KC than to head to Denver, although they may look west, right, Ethan? But you laid out the case that we've been working on with the Healthy Alliance and Medicaid expansion folks for nearing 2 decades. God, I can't believe I said it. So the question I have is, Jerry Moran sends out a newsletter every Monday night that I read, and he's always showing himself around the counties, not this county, but all the counties, and often at healthcare facilities. What do the professionals who met with you, do you imagine? I mean, it's a bit of a hard question to ask and have you answer, but I'm really trying to get at what are they saying to him that they did or didn't say to you? Because I'd go in and I'd expect to hear a lot of what you just told us. That is not what I hear relayed from our representation, the one sole representation that I can access in DC that has a slightly different point of view.
No, again, as you mentioned, difficult for me to really answer what they're telling Senator Moran. The visits I had were pretty candid about a lot of those challenges. So, but wouldn't really be able to speak to what.
But what are they saying to him that he is, that's my question is, what is your impression about what they're saying to you versus to anyone else?
I just don't. I don't really have any sense of what they're. If it's different, I just don't have any sense. I mean, they didn't share with me. This is what we've said to other people. So I can only kind of relay what they shared with me, and that was about a lot of the kind of crisis level challenges that we're experiencing in Kansas that I unfortunately think may continue to get worse in the coming years.
Two questions, because I may not get the mic again. Representative Clayton, what does the Wichita Chamber of Commerce think about redistricting? And Senator Corson, we know your position and your listening to the plight of rural hospitals. What do the state senators and state senator and representative from Pratt think about rural hospitals and the position they're in?
So I laughed a little when he asked about what the Wichita Chamber thought about redistricting. One thing that we need to keep in mind is that the most powerful member of the Kansas Senate is the Senate president, who is from Wichita. The most powerful member of the Kansas House, who is our speaker, is from, survey says, Wichita. They are not going to divide Wichita. Why would they do that? It is something that they are inflicting on us. And I think that might be part of the reason why I have some colleagues in the House who are holding out and not signing that petition. Because, it's easy to hate on Johnson County. It is hilarious. Like, they really do think that we are the literal worst, right? But they kind of look, and even a lot of them can see, hey, wait a minute. Wichita is a large city. It's the largest city in the state. Overland Park is the second largest. And so I think even they look and sort of see this unfair unbalance of power within their own state. But I would assume that the Wichita Chamber would not want Wichita to be split, but it never will. I could draw a map that would split it, though. It's, hey, I'll give them something to cry about, so to speak. But I don't believe in that kind of retaliatory thing, even though it's really funny. It's not professional. So, but yeah, basically that's what's going on with that power dynamic.
And the second question, I would answer it this way. I think that one of the lingering frustrations that I think we all share is that, for example, something like Medicaid expansion, which would help our rural hospitals, hasn't really come to the floor in a clean way for an up or down vote. Why that has been so frustrating is that it would pass the Senate. There are a number of Republicans in the Senate that support Medicaid expansion. that are rural Republicans. The only reason, at least in the Senate, and I'll let my House colleagues answer for their chamber, but the only reason that we've not passed Medicaid expansion out of the Senate is not because a majority of senators don't support it. A majority of senators support it. It's because Senate leadership has not brought it to the floor. And so that's been my frustration. I think every member on an issue of such importance should have the ability to vote up or down on an issue like Medicaid expansion. So that's probably how I'd handle. There are a number of rural legislators who support Medicaid expansion and other measures that would help rural health outcomes.
Yeah, the gentleman over here was asking about the map issue. Go to ksfairmaps.org and you can get all the information. There are about 12 nonpartisan groups who are opposing this new map system.
Hello? Yeah. Stephanie, you may not like this, but I'm going to disagree with you. The redistricting was brought on by the Republicans, and it was done in their favor. I agree with you that there's other people out there that don't like the economic engine of Johnson County, but I think we as Democrats have to fight back. We can't take it. So this thing with Donald Trump or President Trump started with Texas. We didn't do that. He implemented that. California came back as retaliation. I think we needed to do that to show that we're not going to take this. So that's my opinion.
All right, I will go ahead and counter with this. We do not have the votes. There are fewer Democrats in the House than there are Republicans, and there are fewer Democrats in the Senate than there are Republicans. If we want, and I will set aside my ego, I will set aside partisanship, I will set aside just about anything to get the most morally correct and non-biased appropriate maps passed. And so if that means treating people on the other side of the aisle with compassion and respect and understanding where they're coming from at the cost of my ego or my desire to come at this angrily, I'll do it because that is how important this is. So, and I will tell you this, notice how calm I am about this redistricting situation. And one of the reasons is this, is that number one, it is your democracy and your maps. And as your representative, or at least for some of you, I have been charged with making sure that I get it done. And also, when I have the votes, I'm chill. If you see me losing it and throwing a fit, it means that I don't have the votes and all I have is my voice and my anger and my opinion. You all want me calm. You want me nonpartisan. You want me cool as a cucumber because that means that we stand a chance at having morally appropriate maps.
Yeah, I'd just add that we are limited to what we can do in Topeka. We just don't have the numbers. You guys do. And you're the biggest source of resistance I see in the state is the constituents of those people. And so make the calls, especially, some of the worst that are supporting this are in South Johnson County. And they've got the most to lose in this next election if they support redistricting in Johnson County. So I'm kind of torn between let them go ahead and do it and lose their positions next year. But it's vital that we have their constituents calling them and saying, why in the heck are you doing this? You think you're really going to divide up Johnson County? Well, good luck getting my vote next time. So talk to your people, especially, as I say, in South Johnson County. If you know anybody out there, tell them just to keep talking to those folks out there because, as I say, It's the people of Kansas that have the best opportunity to resist this redistricting.
All right, we have time for one more.
Yeah, my name is Tom Wegman. I'm a retired physician, and I was interested very much in your comments about healthcare in Kansas. One of the problems we need to think about is that not all hospital losses are political chicanery or malfeasance. I mean, many of these hospitals go in and out because the requirements in technical support to run an efficient hospital have gotten to be so enormous that small companies, small communities can no longer run these things. There's just not enough usage for these places. There's not enough utilization. So it then becomes perhaps more a function of having focal emergency care and otherwise provide for excellent transportation from small hospitals to other nodal areas that would be more capable of providing more extensive care. Thank you.
No, that's a good comment. There is a lot of transportation that currently does go on between Western Kansas and primarily Wesley Medical Center in Wichita is the main transport for the really serious cases. So there's a lot of transportation, but again, I mean that is not without challenges in and of itself. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think it was last week in the New York Times, they had a very interesting article that we rely on some really excellent foreign-trained doctors to come to the United States, especially to work in rural areas of the state of Kansas. And now Trump has put these visa requirements on that hospitals and so on have to pay $100,000 to the government to get these people in. Well, it's going to cut the number of foreign doctors that we're going to be able to rely on to come to work in our healthcare system in the United States. So it's another thing that's making it worse, and another thing that's going to continue to have problems with our healthcare systems all across the country.
All right. We're going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for coming this month. Remember, third Saturday for November and December. Not fourth Saturday, third Saturday. We hope to see you then. Have a great month. Thank you.